All right, guys, welcome back to Ojio Sports Fitbusters. Today we're going to be talking about a less commonly known myth, but it's one that's relevant if you're in the gym and you're trying to get muscle, you're trying to put on some bulk. So the myth is that max training or training for max strength is going to put on the most muscle.
I gotta tell you, Luke, I look across the table here, and while I've clearly been lifting, I think that you might just be the perfect man to help bust this particular myth.
All right, well, I'm definitely not bulky, I'm definitely not massive. But how about this? We'll work together and we'll talk about what's going on with when you do train for maximum strength and what happens when you do train for hypertrophy, which we'll talk about. So
Yeah, I remember when I was young, when I was in high school, especially participating in high school sports, we always had weight training class. And the one thing they always told us to do was always to max out. You really had to push yourself to the point of breaking, practically, of almost to muscle failure. And they said that was the way you were actually going to get big and you were going to get strong.
And I think that it's in the long term, that's a strategy that helps to build mass, but in the short term, it's actually more of a nervous system. It's nervous system training. It's for your brain. So your brain has a task of lifting this heavy object and it has to get better and more efficient at doing that task. So instead of building the muscle, which takes a long time, people don't understand how long it takes to build lean tissue. Instead, what your body says, well, I'm going to teach this human being, this body, to recruit more motor units to get the task done. So let's say it's like an analogy of a school of fish. When you do the movement the first time, you've got like 10 fish in your school of fish, and that represents all the motor neurons that are firing. But as you train your brain to lift heavier object, this school of fish keeps growing larger. You don't necessarily require more muscle mass. That's why oftentimes you'll see skinny guys that are ridiculously strong, and you're like, how did that happen? Because it's a brain exercise to lift heavy. So it's training the neural pathways to get the job done effectively. So that's why it's not necessarily the best job or best way to get bigger, because getting bigger is hypertrophy.
So tell me about that. How do you train yourself to get bigger and stronger from that perspective?
Okay, so hypertrophy is building muscle. It's just it's a way of saying how to build muscle. And it's simple but complex. It's simple because it's an equation as break the muscle down and rebuild it, and allow the body to rebuild it. Break the muscle down and rebuild it. And doing sets of, one with maximal strength isn't necessarily the best way to break that muscle tissue down effectively. Sometimes 4 sets of 8 to 12 reps, where you can barely get those last couple reps up, is a good way of tearing the tissue down to the point that your body says, okay, I need to rebuild this area fast because this body, this human, is requiring that of me. And that brings us to an interesting point, because the workout is the breakdown of the tissue. It's not getting bigger.
It's only half the equation at that point.
You're a master of this with running intervals with your website, but yes, it's the recovery that matters.
Right.
It's not about breaking the tissue down and never allowing it to heal. It's all the magic happens in the recovery. So that recovery formula, you can help me with that. This is where you're going to be able to chime in and really help out with the understanding of this. Once we've broken down the muscle tissue, we've gotten a good workout, we've gotten that pump going, and soreness is going to set in. How do we best deal with that situation so you can recover and build some muscle tissue?
Well, I think the strategy that most people use it is sort of like a schedule of recovery, depending on the kind of work you're doing, especially. For anyone that is doing strenuous activity that involves endurance, you want to immediately, within probably 20 minutes, refuel your body with a wide array of nutrients. It's not just protein right off the bat. You want to do carbs, you want to do fats, you want to do protein, you want to do a full spectrum of recovery very quickly after the activity, especially if it's any sort of endurance, especially if you're really working out for an extended period of time. And then you want to follow that up later, probably within about 40 minutes. You're talking 20 minutes into this, and then 20 minutes later, that's when you really want to hit with the strong, high quality, easily digestible protein to help build up those muscles.
Okay, so you're talking nutrition from the standpoint of getting the raw materials into the body that the body needs to rebuild itself. Hugely important. I'm going to say that sleep is probably another cornerstone. We're going to have to get some sleep to get your body into recovered state and rested state where you can build up, right?
Absolutely, especially if you consider, when you talk about what building muscle is, it's breaking down the tissue. If you think about your entire human system, as you break down, it's like being sick or like being, under the weather, getting ill.
It's an injury.
Absolutely. And one of the things that everyone always tells you when you're sick, when you're injured, anything like that, you have to rest. When you get an injury, what do they say? Rest, ice, compression, elevation. The first thing they say is rest. So you've got to have that downtime to allow your body internally to address these micro injuries that you're creating.
Well, I also feel like if you're gonna invest time into that post-workout recovery strategy, you're gonna recover faster so you can go break down that muscle again sooner. Right. So if you don't sleep, if you're drinking alcohol, you're not getting the right nutrients into your body, you're just slowing down the whole process, and then soreness could turn into an injury. And people don't understand that.
Absolutely.
Soreness is an injury, but if you just keep training through that and not understanding that you have to rebuild the foundation, you're just gonna get injured.
No, totally.
So max training is effective, but it's effective for neural pathways. And yes, those neural pathways are important because if you develop those neural pathways, then you can get heavier lifts and get more volume out of it. But it's not the end all be all, and it probably won't build hypertrophy the way some people want.
Right.
So the real answer is to go, 4 sets, 8 to 12, really fatigue the muscle, but then more importantly, recover. So this fitness myth is busted, and we've given you a great strategy to take home and implement right away. So that way, if you do want to build your muscle, you know how to do it. Jason, thanks for stopping by.
Absolutely.
Check out runningintervals.com for great recovery strategies, shakes, nutrition, all that stuff. Thanks for watching Ojio Sports Fitbusters, and we'll see you next time.